Books. You know them, you love them, and I read them. Hi everybody, hello, it's Sunday, which means I read books on Sunday, you know? Completely different from reading all those video games on other days. For there are no moving pictures and buttons to press. Hard to believe, but I know. It is what it is. I forgot to update my thingy. Hold on. The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett is what we will be reading today. I know absolutely very little about Terry Pratchett or what he wrote. He wrote them Discworld novels, which are comedy, fantasy kind of books. I've only read like maybe a third of one of those books many years ago. It was called Small Gods, but I never finished it for some reason. And today we'll be reading one of those as well. It's gonna be the very first one of the lot, The Color of Magic. It's the first Discworld book. And I'm excited for it. It's pretty short, so we might possibly go through all of it today, or perhaps not. Perhaps we'll just go about half. I don't know. We'll see how I feel about it. I've been reading a lot, voice acting a lot this week, so my throat might just give out, you know, at any moment. And I should probably watch out. Let me just stop the music here and turn on the good music on my thingy. There you go, that's my reading tunes. Turn that volume up a little bit more. I think I turned off every sound effect that might scare us or distract us, but I'm not sure. We will see. Alright, let's let out a big yawn. Oh god, oh Jesus Christ. I am the big yawning man. Let us take a swig of my coffee, and I think we'll be good to go. Yes. Oh god. Neurons activate. And some water too while we're at it. Right. Let's get through it then. The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. Prologue. In a distant and second-hand set of dimensions, in an astral plane that was never meant to fly, the curling star mists waver and part. See, great Atuin, the turtle comes, swimming slowly through the interstellar gulf, hydrogen frost on his ponderous limbs, his huge and ancient shell pocked with meteor craters. Through sea-sized eyes that are crusted with rheum and asteroid dust, he stares fixedly at the destination. In a brain bigger than a city, with geological slowness, he thinks only of the weight. Most of the weight is of course accounted for by Beryllia, Tubul, Great Typhon, and Jarakeen, the four giant elephants upon whose broad and star-tanned shoulders the disk of the world rests, garlanded by the long waterfall at its vast circumference, and domed by the baby blue vault of heaven. Astropsychology has been as yet unable to establish what they think about. The Great Turtle was a mere hypothesis until the day the small and secretive kingdom of Krul, whose rim most mountains project over the rimfall, built a gantry and pulley arrangement at the tip of the most precipitous crag, and lowered several observers over the edge in a quartz-windowed brass vessel to peer through the mist veils. The early astrozoologists, hauled back from their long dangle by enormous teams of slaves, were able to bring back much information about the shape and nature of Atuin and the elephants, but this did not resolve fundamental questions about the nature and purpose of the universe. For example, what was Atuin's actual sex? This vital question, said the astrozoologists with mounting authority, would not be answered until a larger and more powerful gantry was constructed for a deep space vessel. In the meantime, they could only speculate about the revealed cosmos. There was, for example, the theory that Atuin had come from nowhere and would continue at a uniform crawl or steady gait into nowhere for all time. This theory was popular among academics. An alternative, favored by those of a religious persuasion, was that Atuin was crawling from the birthplace to the time of mating, as were all the stars in the sky, which were obviously also carried by giant turtles. When they arrived, they would briefly and passionately mate for the first and only time, and from that fiery union new turtles would be born to carry a new pattern of worlds. This was known as the Big Bang hypothesis. Thus it was that a young Cosmochelonian of the Steadygate faction, testing a new telescope with which he hoped to make measurements of the precise albedo of Great Atuin's right eye, was on this eventful evening the first outsider to see the smoke rise upward from the burning of the oldest city in the world. Later that night he became so engrossed in his studies he completely forgot about it. Nevertheless, he was the first. There were others. The color of magic. Fire roared through the bifurcated city of Ankh-Morpork. Where it licked the wizard's quarter, it burned blue and green, and was even laced with strange sparks of the eighth color, octarine, where its outriders found their way into the vats and oil stores all along the merchant street. It progressed in a series of blazing fountains and explosions. In the streets of the perfume blenders it burned with a sweetness, where it touched bundles of rare and dry herbs. In the storerooms of the drug masters it made men go mad and talk to God. By now the whole of downtown Morpork was alight, and the richer and worthier citizens of Ankh on the far bank were bravely responding to the situation by furiously demolishing the bridges. But already the ships in the Morpork docks, laden with grain, cotton, and timber, and coated with tar, were blazing merrily, and their moorings, burnt to ashes, were breasting the river Ankh on the ebb tide, igniting riverside palaces and bowers as they drifted like drowning fireflies towards the sea. In any case, sparks were riding the breeze and touching down far across the river, in hidden gardens and remote rickyards. The smoke from the merry burning rose miles high, in a wind-sculpted black column that could be seen across the whole of the Discworld. It was certainly impressive from the cool, dark hilltop a few leagues away, where two figures were watching with considerable interest. The taller of the pair was chewing on a chicken leg and leaning on a sword that was only marginally shorter than the average man. If it wasn't for the air of wary intelligence about him, it might have been supposed that he was a barbarian from the Hubland wastes. His partner was much shorter and wrapped from head to toe in a brown cloak. Later, when he has occasion to move, it will be seen that he moves lightly, cat-like. The two had barely exchanged a word in the last 20 minutes, except for a short and inconclusive argument as to whether a particularly powerful explosion had been the oil bond store or the workshop of Keribol the Enchanter. Money hinged on that fact. Now, the big man finished gnawing at the bone and tossed it into the grass, smiling ruefully. "There go all those little alleyways," he said. "I liked them." "All the treasure houses," said the small man. He added thoughtfully, "Do gems burn? I wonder. 'Tis said they're kin to coal. All the gold melting and running down the gutters, said the big one, ignoring him, and all the wine boiling in the barrels. There were rats, said his brown companion. Rats, I'll grant you. It was no place to be in high summer. That's true. One can't help feeling, though, a momentary... He trailed off, then brightened. We owed old Fredor at the Crimson Leech 8 silver pieces, he added. The little man nodded. They were silent for a while as a whole new series of explosions carved a red line across a hitherto dark section of the greatest city in the world. Then the big man stirred. Weasel? Yes? I wonder who started it. The small swordsman known as the Weasel said nothing. He was watching the road in the ruddy light. Few had come that way since the Deosil Gate had been one of the first to collapse in a shower of white-hot embers. But two were coming up it now. The Weasel's eyes, always at their sharpest in gloom and half-light, made out the shapes of two mounted men and some sort of low beast behind them. Doubtless a rich merchant escaping with as much treasure as he could lay frantic hands on. The Weasel, said as much to his companion, who sighed. The status of footpad ill suits us, said the barbarian. But, as you say, times are hard, and there are no soft beds tonight. He shifted his grip on his sword, and, as the leading rider drew near, stepped out onto the road with a hand held up, and his face set in a grin nicely calculated to assure yet threaten. Your pardon, sir, he began. The rider reined in his horse, and drew back his hood. The big man looked into a face blotched with superficial burns and punctuated by tufts of singed beard. Even the eyebrows had gone. Bugger off, said the face. You're Bravd the Hublander, aren't you? Bravd became aware that he had fumbled the initiative. Just go away, will you, said the rider. I just haven't got the time for you, do you understand? He looked around and added, That goes for your shadow-loving flea-bag partner, too, wherever he's hiding. The Weasel stepped up to the horse and peered at the disheveled figure. Why, it's Rincewind the Wizard, isn't it? He said in tones of delight, meanwhile filing the wizard's description of him in his memory for leisurely vengeance. I thought I recognized the voice. Bravd spat and sheathed his sword. It was seldom worth tangling with wizards. They so rarely had any treasure worth speaking of. He talks pretty big for a gutter wizard, he muttered. You don't understand at all, said the wizard wearily. I'm so scared of you, my spine has turned to jelly. It's just that I'm suffering from an overdose of terror right now. I mean, when I've got over that, then I'll have time to be decently frightened of you. The Weasel pointed towards the burning city. You've been through that? He asked. The wizard rubbed a red raw hand across his eyes. I was there when it started. See him, back there? He pointed back down the road to where his traveling companion was still approaching, having adopted the method of riding that involved falling out of the saddle every few seconds. Well, said Weasel. He started it, said Rincewind simply. Bravd and Weasel looked at the figure, now hopping across the road with one foot in a stirrup. Fire Razor, is he? Said Bravd at last. No, said Rincewind, not precisely. Let's just say that if complete and utter chaos were lightning, then he'd be the sort to stand on a hilltop in a thunderstorm wearing wet copper armor and shouting, All gods are bastards. Got any food? There's some chicken, said Weasel, in exchange for a story. What's his name? Said Bravd, who tended to lag behind in conversations. Chewflower. Chewflower? Said Bravd. What a funny name. You, said Rincewind, dismounting, do not know the half of it. Chicken, you say? Deviled, said Weasel. The wizard groaned. That reminds me, added the Weasel, snapping his fingers. There was a really big explosion about, half an hour ago. That was the oil's bond store going up, said Rincewind, wincing at the memory of the burning rain. Weasel turned and grinned expectantly at his companion, who grunted and handed over a coin from his pouch. Then there was a scream from the roadway, cut off abruptly. Rincewind did not look up from his chicken. One of the things he can do, he can't ride a horse, he said. Then he stiffened as if sandbagged by a sudden recollection, gave a small yelp of terror, and dashed into the gloom. When he returned, the being called Chewflower was hanging limply over his shoulder. It was small and skinny, and dressed very oddly in a pair of knee-length breeches and a shirt in such a violent and vivid conflict of colors that Weasel's fastidious eye was offended even in the half-light. "No bones broken by the feels of things," said Rincewind. He was breathing heavily. Browd winked at the weasel and went to investigate the shape that they assumed was a pack animal. "You'd be wise to forget it," said the wizard, without looking up from his examination of the unconscious Chewflower. "Believe me, a power protects it." "A spell," said the weasel, squatting down. "No, but magic of a kind, I think. Not the usual sort. I mean, it can turn gold into copper while at the same time it's still gold. It makes men rich by destroying their possessions. It allows the weak to walk fearlessly among thieves. It passes through the strongest doors to reach the most protected treasuries. Even now it has me enslaved, so that I must follow this madman willy-nilly and protect him from harm. It's stronger than you, Bravd. It is. I think more cunning even than you, Weasel." "What is it called, then, this mighty magic?" Rincewind shrugged. "In our tongue it is called reflected sound as of underground spirit. Is there any wine?" You must know that I am not without artifice where magic is concerned," said Weasel. "Only last year did I, assisted by my friend there, part the notoriously powerful archmage of Imituri from his staff, his belt of moon jewels, and his life, in that approximate order. I do not fear this reflected sound of underground spirits of which you speak. However," he added, "you engage my interest. Perhaps you would care to tell me more?" Bravd looked at the shape on the road. It was closer now, and clearer in the pre-dawn light. It looked for all the world like a box on legs, he said. "I'll tell you about it," said Rincewind, "if there's any wine, that is." Down in the valley there was a roar and a hiss. Someone more thoughtful than the rest had ordered to be shut the big river gates that were at the point where Ankh flowed out of the Twin City. Denied its usual egress, the river had burst its banks and was pouring down the fire-ravaged streets. Soon the continent of flame became a series of islands, each one growing smaller as the dark tide rose. And up from the city of fumes and smoke rose a broiling cloud of steam, covering the stars. Weasel thought that it looked like some dark fungus or mushroom. The twin city of proud Ankh and pestilent Morpok, of which all the other cities of time and space are, as it were, mere reflections, has stood many assaults in its long and crowded history, and has always risen to flourish again. So the fire and the subsequent flood, which destroyed everything left that was not flammable and added a particularly noisome flux to the survivor's problems, did not mark its end. Rather, it was a fiery punctuation mark, a coal-like comma, or salamander semicolon, in a continuing story. Several days before these events, a ship came up the Ankh on the dawn tide and fetched up, among many others, in the maze of wharves and docks on the Morpok shore. It carried a cargo of pink pearls, milk nuts, pumice, some official letters for the patrician of Ankh and the man. It was the man who engaged the attention of Blind Hugh, one of the beggars on early duty at Pearl Dock. He nudged Cripple Wah in the ribs and pointed wordlessly. Now the stranger was standing on the quayside, watching several straining seamen carry a large brass-bound chest down the gangplank. Another man, obviously the captain, was standing beside him. There was about the seamen every nerve in Blind Hugh's body which tended to vibrate in the presence of even a small amount of impure gold at 50 paces, screamed into his brain, the air of one anticipating imminent enrichment. Sure enough, when the chest had been deposited on the cobbles, the stranger reached into a pouch and there was the flash of a coin. Several coins. Gold. Blind Hugh, his body twinging like a hazel rod in the presence of water, whistled to himself. Then he nudged Wah again and sent him scurrying off down a nearby alley into the heart of the city. When the captain walked back onto his ship, leaving the newcomer looking faintly bewildered on the quayside, Blind Hugh snatched up his begging cup and made his way across the street with an ingratiating leer. At the sight of him, the stranger started to fumble urgently with his money pouch. "Good day to thee, sire," Blind Hugh began, and found himself looking up in a face with 4 eyes in it. He turned to run. "Exclamation mark," said the stranger, and grabbed his arm. Hugh was aware that the sailors lining the rail of the ship were laughing at him. At the same time, his specialized senses detected an overpowering impression of money. He froze. The stranger let go and quickly fumbled through a small black book he had taken from his belt. Then he said, "Hallo." "What?" said Hugh. The man looked blank. "Hallo?" he repeated, rather louder than necessary, and so carefully that Hugh could hear the vowels tinkling into place. "Hallo yourself," Hugh riposted. The stranger smiled widely. We fumbled yet again in the pouch. This time his hand came out holding a large red gold coin. It was in fact slightly larger than an $8,000 Ankian crown, and the design on it was unfamiliar, but it spoke inside Hugh's mind in a language he understood perfectly. "My current owner," it said, "is in need of succor and assistance. Why not give it to him so you and me can go off somewhere and enjoy ourselves?" Subtle changes in the beggar's posture made the stranger feel more at ease. He consulted the small book again. "I wish to be directed to a hotel, tavern, lodging house, inn, hospice, caravanserai," he said. "What, all of them?" said Hugh, taken aback. "Question mark," said the stranger. Hugh was aware that a small crowd of fishwives, shellfish diggers, and freelance gawpers were watching them with interest. "Look," he said, "I know a good tavern. Is that enough?" He shuddered to think of the gold coin escaping from his life. He'd keep that one, even if Timur confiscated all the rest. And the big chest that comprised most of the newcomer's luggage looked to be full of gold, Hugh decided. The 4-eyed man looked at his book. "I would like to be directed to a hotel, place of repose, tavern, Yes, all right, come on then," said Hugh hurriedly. He picked up one of the bundles and walked away quickly. The stranger, after a moment's hesitation, strolled after him. A train of thought shunted its way through Hugh's mind. Getting the newcomer to the broken drum so easily was a stroke of luck, no doubt of it. And Emor would probably reward him. But for all his new acquaintance's mildness, there was something about him that made Hugh uneasy. And for the life of him, he couldn't figure out what it was. Not the 2 extra eyes, although they were. There was something else. He glanced back. There, the little man was ambling along in the middle of the street, looking around him with an expression of keen interest. Something else Hugh saw nearly made him gibber. The massive wooden chest, which he had last seen resting solidly on the quayside, was following on its master's heels with a gentle rocking gait. Slowly, in case a sudden movement on his part might break his fragile control over his own legs. Hugh bent slightly so that he could see under the chest. There were lots and lots of little legs. Very deliberately, Hugh turned around and walked very carefully toward the broken drum. "Odd," said Emor. "He had this big wooden chest," added Cripple Wah. He'd have to be a merchant or a spy," said Emor. He pulled a scrap of meat from the cutlet in his hand and tossed it into the air. It hadn't reached the zenith of its arc before a black shape detached itself from the shadows in a corner of the room and swooped down, taking the morsel in mid-air. A merchant or a spy, repeated Emor. I'd prefer a spy. A spy pays for himself twice, because there's always a reward when we turn him in. What do you think, Whittle? Opposite Emor, the second greatest thief in Ankh-Morpork half closed his one eye and shrugged. I've checked on the ship, he said. It's a freelance trader. Does the occasional run to the Brown Islands. People there are just savages. They don't understand about spies, and I expect they eat merchants. He looked a bit like a merchant, volunteered Wai. Except he wasn't fat. There was a flutter of wings at the window. Emor shifted his bulk out of the chair and crossed the room, coming back with a large raven. After he'd unfastened the message capsule from its leg, it flew up to join its fellows lurking among the rafters. Whittle regarded it without love. Emor's ravens were notoriously loyal to their master, to the extent that Whittle's one attempt to promote himself to the rank of greatest thief in Ankh-Morpork had caused their master's right-hand man his left eye. But not his life. However, Emor never grudged the man his ambitions. B12, said Emor, tossing the old file aside and unrolling the tiny scroll within. Goran the cat, said Whittle automatically. On station, up in the gong tower at the Temple of Small Gods. He says Hugh has taken our stranger to the Broken Drum. Well, that's good enough. Broadman is a friend of ours, isn't he? Aye, said Whittle. If he knows what's good for trade. Among his customers has been your man Goran, said Emor pleasantly, for he writes here about a box on legs, if I read the scroll correctly. He looked at Whittle over the top of the paper. Whittle looked away. He will be disciplined, he said flatly, while looked at the man leaning back in his chair, his black-clad frame resting as nonchalantly as a rimland puma on a jungle branch, and decided that Goran atop Small God's temple would soon be joining those little deities in the multifold dimensions of beyond. And he owed Wa 3 copper pieces. Emor crumpled at the note and tossed it into a corner. I think we'll wander along to the drum later on, Whittle. Perhaps, too, we may try this beer that your men find so tempting. Whittle said nothing. Being Emor's right-hand man was like being gently flogged to death with scented bootlaces. The twin city of Ankh-Morpork, foremost of all the cities bounding the Circle Sea, was a matter of course the home of a large number of gangs, thieves, guilds, syndicates, and similar organizations. This was one of the reasons for its wealth. Most of the humbler folk on the Withershin side of the river and Morpork's busy valleys supplemented their meager incomes by filling some small role for one or the other of the competing gangs. So it was that by the time Hugh and Twoflower entered the courtyard of the Broken Drum, the leaders of a number of them were aware that someone had arrived in the city who appeared to have much treasure. Some reports from the more observant spies included details about a book that told the stranger what to say, and a box that walked by itself. These facts were immediately discounted. No magician capable of such enchantments ever came within a mile of Morpork docks. It still being that hour when most of the city was just rising or about to go to bed, there were few people in the drum to watch Twoflower descend the stairs. When the luggage appeared behind him and started to lurch confidently down the steps, the customers at the rough wooden stables, as one man, looked suspiciously at their drinks. Broadman was browbeating the small troll who swept the bar when the trio walked past him. What in hell is that? He said. Just don't talk about it, hissed Hugh. Twoflower was already thumbing through his book. What's he doing? Said Broadman, arms akimbo. It tells him what to say. I know it sounds ridiculous, muttered Hugh. How can a book tell a man what to say? I wish for an accommodation, a room, lodgings, the lodging house, full board. Are your rooms clean? A room with a view. What is your rate for one night? Said Chew Flower in one breath. Broadman looked at Hugh. The beggar shrugged. He's got plenty of money, he said. Tell him it's 3 copper pieces then, and that thing will have to go in the stable. Question mark? Said the stranger. Broadman held up 3 thick red fingers, and the man's face was suddenly a sunny display of comprehension. He reached into his pouch and laid 3 large gold pieces in Broadman's palm. Broadman stared at them. They presented about 4 times the worth of the broken drum, staff included. He looked at Hugh. There was no help there. He looked at the stranger. He swallowed. Yes, he said, in an unnaturally high voice. And then there's meals, of course. You understand, yes? Food, you eat? No? He made the appropriate motions. Foot? Said the little man. Yes, said Broadman, beginning to sweat. Have a look in your little book, I should. The man opened the book and ran a finger down one page. Broadman, who could read after a fashion, peered over the top of the volume. What he saw made no sense. Food, said the stranger. Yes, cutlet, hash, chop, stew, ragout, fricassee, mince, collop, soufflé, dumpling, blancmange, sorbet, gruel, sausage. Let you have a sausage. Beans without a bean, kickshaws, jelly, jam, giblets. He beamed at Broadman. All that, said the innkeeper weakly. It's just the way he talks, said Hugh. Don't ask me why. He just does. All eyes in the room were watching the stranger, except for a pair belonging to Rincewind the wizard, who was sitting in the darkest corner nursing a mug of very small beer. He was watching the luggage. Watch Rincewind. Look at him, scrawny, like most wizards, and clad in a dark red robe on which a few mystic sigils were embroidered in tarnished sequins. Some might have taken him for a mere apprentice enchanter who had run away from his master out of defiance, or boredom, fear, and a lingering taste for heterosexuality. Yet around his neck was a chain bearing the bronze octagon that marked him as an alumnus of Unseen University, the high school of magic whose time and space transcended campus is never precisely here or there. Graduates were usually destined for mageship, at least, but Rincewind, after an unfortunate event, had left knowingly only one spell and made a living off sorts around the town by capitalizing on an innate gift for languages. He avoided work as a rule, but had the quickness of wit that put his acquaintances in mind of a bright rodent. And he knew Sapient Pierwood when he saw it. He was seeing it now, and didn't quite believe it. An archmage, by dint of great effort and much expenditure of time, might eventually obtain a small staff made from the timber of the sapient bear tree. It grew only on the sites of ancient magic. There were probably no more than 2 such staffs in all the city of the Circle Sea. A large chest of it. Rincewood tried to work it out, and decided that even if the box were crammed with star opals and sticks of auriculatum, the contents would not be worth 1/10 the price of the container. A vein started to throb in his forehead. He stood up and made his way through the trio. May I be of assistance? He ventured. Shove off, Rincewind, snarled the Broadman. I only thought it might be useful to address the gentleman in his own tongue, said the wizard gently. He's doing all right on his own, said the innkeeper, but took a few steps backward. Rincewind smiled politely at the stranger and tried a few words of Chimeran. He prided himself on his fluency in the tongue, but the stranger only looked bemused. It won't work, said Huge knowledgeably. It's the book, you see. It tells him what to say. Magic. Rincewind switched to High Borogravian, to Vanglamesht, Sumtri, and even Black Urugu, the language with no nouns and only one adjective, which is obscene. Each was met with polite incomprehension. In desperation, he tried Heathenthrob, and the little man's face split into a delighted grin. At last, he said, My good sir, this is remarkable. Although in Throb the last word in fact became a thing which may happen but once in the usable lifetime of a canoe, hollowed diligently by axe and fire from the tallest diamondwood tree that grows in the noted diamondwood forest on the slowest slopes of Mount Awayawa, home of the fire gods, or so it is said. Huh? What was that? Said Broadman suspiciously. What did the innkeeper say? Said the little man. Rincewind swallowed. Broadman, he said. 2 mugs of your best ale, please. You can understand him? Oh, sure. Tell him he's very welcome. Tell him breakfast is 1 gold piece. For a moment, Broadman's face looked as though some vast internal struggle was going on, and then he added with a burst of generosity, I'll throw in yours, too. Stranger, said Rincewind levelly, if you stay here, you will be knifed or poisoned by nightfall, but don't stop smiling, or so will I. Oh, come now, said the stranger, looking around. This looks like a delightful place. A genuine Morporkian tavern. I've heard so much about them. You know, all these quaint old beams, and so reasonable, too. Rincewind glanced around quickly, in case some leakage of enchantment from the magician's quarter across the river had momentarily transported them to some other place. No, this was still the interior of the drum. Its walls stained with smoke, its floors a compost of old rushes and nameless beetles, its sour beer not so much purchased as merely hired for a while. He tried to fit the image around the word quaint, or rather the nearest Throb equivalent, which was the pleasant oddity of design found in the little coral houses of the sponge-eating pygmies on the Orohai Peninsula. His mind reeled back from the effort. The visitor went on. My name is Chewflower, and extended his hand. Instinctively, the other 3 looked down to see if there was coin in it. Pleased to meet you, said Rincewind. I'm Rincewind. Look, I wasn't joking. This is a tough place. Good! Exactly what I wanted. Eh? What is this stuff in the mugs? This? Beer. Thanks, Broadman. Yes, beer. You know, beer. Ah, the so typical drink. A small gold piece will be sufficient payment, do you think? I do not want to cause offense. It was already half of his purse. Yarrt, croaked Rincewind. I mean, no, it won't cause offense. Good. You say this is a tough place. Frequented, you mean, by heroes and men of adventure? Rincewind considered this. Yes, he managed. Excellent. I would like to see more. Or I would like to meet some. An explanation occurred to the wizard. Ah, he said, you've come to hire mercenaries. Warriors who fight for the tribe with most milk-nut meal? Oh no, I just want to meet them, so that when I get home I can say that I did it. Rincewind thought that a meeting with most of the drum's clientele would mean that Chewflower never went home again. Unless he lived downriver and happened to float past. Where is your home? He inquired. Broadman had slipped away into some back room, he noticed. Hugh was watching them suspiciously from a nearby table. Have you heard of the city of Best Pelargic? Well, I didn't spend much time in Throb. I was just passing through, you know. Oh, it's not in Throb. I speak Throb because there are many Betrobi sailors in our ports. Best Pelargic is the major seaport of the Acatian Empire. Never heard of it, I'm afraid. Chewflower raised his eyebrows. No, it is quite big. You sail turnwise from the Brown Islands for about a week and there it is. Are you alright? He hurried around the table and patted the wizard on the back. Rincewind choked on his beer. The counterweight continent. 3 streets away, an old man dropped a coin into a saucer of acid and swirled it gently. Broadman waited impatiently. Ill at ease in a room made noisome by vats and bubbling beakers and lined with shelves containing shadowy shapes suggestive of skulls and stuffed impossibilities. Well, he demanded. One cannot hurry these things, said the old alchemist peevishly. A saying takes time. Ah. He prodded the saucer, where the coin now lay in a swirl of green color. He made some calculations of scrap of parchment. Exceptionally interesting, he said at last. Is it genuine? The old man pursed his lips. It depends on how you define the term, he said. If you mean, is this coin the same as, say, a $50 piece? Then the answer is no. I knew it, screamed the innkeeper and started toward the door. I'm not sure that I'm making myself clear, said the alchemist. Broad man turned around angrily. What do you mean? Well, you see, what with one thing and another, our coinage has been somewhat watered over the years. The gold content of the average coin is barely 4 parts in 12, the balance being made out of silver and copper. What of it? I said this coin isn't like ours. It is pure gold. After Broadman had left at a run, the alchemist spent some time staring at the ceiling. Then he drew out a very small piece of thin parchment, rummaged for a pen amongst the debris of his workbench, and wrote a very short, small message. Then he went over to his cages of white doves, black cockerels, and other laboratory animals. From one cage he removed the glossy-coated rat, rolled the parchment into the file attached to a hind leg, and let the animal go. It sniffed around the floor for a moment, then disappeared down a hole in the far wall. At about this time, a hitherto unsuccessful fortune-teller living on the other side of the block chanced to glance into her scrying bowl, gave a small scream, and within the hour had sold her jewelry, various magical accoutrements, most of her clothes, and almost all her other possessions that could not be conveniently carried on the fastest horse she could buy. The fact that later on, when her house collapsed in flames, she herself died in a freak landslide in the Morpok Mountains, proves that death, too, has a sense of humor. Also, at about the same moment as the homing rat disappeared into the maze of runs under the city, scurrying along in faultless obedience to an ancient instinct, the patrician of Ankh-Morpok picked up the letters delivered that morning by Albatross. He looked pensively at the topmost one again and summoned his chief of spies. I think it's time for a break because this book doesn't have much chapters breaking it up. Yeah. Hi Minnie, how you doing? Good morning. I gotta take a drink of water. This music is great, isn't it? This. Now, my throat is phlegmy. Good morning, hi. Big stretch. Oy. But yeah, so yeah, you arrived to something, alright. I'm not quite sure what's going on quite yet, but you arrived to something. We started off with the city in which we're currently taking place, burning to the ground in a big explosion. And then we're flashbacking to this confused guy arriving at the town with his walking chest, throwing money around anywhere because he doesn't know the value of money. And that's just and paying way too much money for things at a seedy tavern, which is full of thieves and other scumbags. And that's about all we know right now. I think I'm going to take an ad break really fast, and then we will go back to reading. Yeah, it's kind of like that, Minnie, yeah. Except he keeps buying stuff for like 10,000 times its value. Mm-hmm. The style of this book somehow also makes it a bit complicated to read. I feel like I keep I keep choosing these comedy books, the British ones specifically, that have this funny style of writing, or they're kind of winding their way around explanations and stuff, you know, and long-winded sentences and repetitions. I feel like that's the style of comedy books that the British love. But I'm getting used to it. It's fine. Anyway, I'm gonna take a break, a short ad break before it interrupts me while reading, and then I'll be back. Okay. And I return to the reading adventures. I think maybe I won't try to push the book today, like all the way to the end. I think I'll be content with just like half of it or so. Or maybe even a third, because I've been reading a lot this week and I feel like maybe I shouldn't push my voice any further than it's been happening already. And I'll be playing Pathfinder tomorrow anyway, so that's gotta be prepared for too. Let's see. Let me just, I think I accidentally scrolled to forwards. Let me catch up. Okay, let's see. And in the broken drum, Rincewind was listening open-mouthed as Chewflower talked. So I decided to see for myself, the little man was saying. 8 years saving up, this has cost me, but worth every half Rinu. I mean, here I am in Ankh-Morpork, famed in song and story. I mean, in the streets that have known the tread of Herrick Whiteblade, Hurun the Barbarian, and Broud the Hublander, and the Weasel. It's all just like I imagined, you know. Rincewind's face was a mask of fascinated horror. I just couldn't stand it anymore back in Bespellergic. Chewflower went on blithely. Sitting at a desk all day, just adding up columns of figures, just a pension to look forward to at the end of it. Where's the romance in that? Chewflower, I thought, it's now or never. You don't just have to listen to stories, you can go there. Now's the time to stop hanging around the docks listening to sailors' tales. So I compiled a phrase book and bought a passage on the next ship to the Brown Islands. No guards, murmured Rincewind. No, why? What have I got that's worth stealing? Rincewind coughed. You have, gold, he said. Barely 2,000 Rinu, hardly enough to keep a man alive for more than a month or two. At home, that is. I imagine they might fetch a bit further here. Would Rinu be one of those big gold coins, said Rincewind. Yes. Chewflower looked worriedly at the wizard over the top of his strange seeing lenses. Will 2,000 be sufficient, do you think? Croaked Rincewind. I mean, yes. Sufficient. Good. Is everyone in the Agatian Empire as rich as you? Me? Rich? Bless you. Whatever put that idea into your head? I am but a poor clerk. Did I pay the innkeeper too much, do you think? Chewflower added. He might have settled for less, Rincewind conceded. Ah, I shall know better next time. I can see I have a lot to learn. An idea occurs to me. Rincewind, would you perhaps consent to be employed as a, I don't know, perhaps the word guide would fit the circumstances? I think I could afford to pay you a Rinu a day. Rincewind opened his mouth to reply, but felt the words huddled together in his throat, reluctant to emerge in a world that was rapidly going mad. Chewflower blushed. I have offended you, he said. It was an impertinent request to make of a professional man such as yourself. Doubtless you have many projects you wish to return to. Some works of high magic, no doubt. No, said Rincewind faintly. Not just at present. Arenu, you say. One a day? Every day? I think perhaps in the circumstances I should make it 1 and 1.5 Renu per day. Plus any out-of-pocket expenses, of course. The wizard rallied magnificently. That will be fine, he said. Great! Chewflower reached into his pouch and took out a large round gold object, glanced at it for a moment and slipped it back. Rincewind didn't get a chance to see it properly. I think, said the tourist, that I would like a little rest now. It was a long crossing, and then perhaps you would care to call back at noon and we can take a look at the city? Sure. Then please be good enough to ask the innkeeper to show me to my room. Rincewind did so, and watched the nervous broad man, who had arrived at a gallop from some back room, lead the way up the wooden steps behind the bar. After a few seconds, the luggage got up and pattered across the floor after them. Then the wizard looked down at the 6 big coins in his hand. Chewflower had insisted on paying his first 4 days' wages in advance. Hugh nodded and smiled encouragingly. Rincewind snarled at him. As a student, Wizard Rincewind had never achieved high marks in precognition. But now unused circuits in his brain were throbbing, and the future might as well have been engraved in bright colors on his eyeballs. The space between his shoulder blades began to itch. The sensible thing to do, he knew, was to buy a horse. It would have to be a fast one, and expensive, offhand. Rincewind couldn't think of any horse dealer he knew who was rich enough to give change out of almost a whole ounce of gold. And then, of course, the other 5 coins would help him set up a useful practice at some safe distance, say, 200 miles. That would be the sensible thing. But what would happen to Chewflower, all alone in a city where even the cockroaches had an unerring instinct for gold? A man would have to be a real heel to leave him. The patrician of Ankh-Morpork smiled, but with his mouth only. The hub-gate, you say, he murmured. The guard captain saluted smartly. Aye, lord. We had to shoot the horse before he would stop. Which, by a fairly direct route, brings you here, said the patrician, looking down at Rincewind. And what have you got to say for yourself? It was rumored that an entire wing of the patrician's palace was filled with clerks who spent their days collating and updating all the information collected by their master's exquisitely organized spy system. Rincewind didn't doubt it. He glanced toward the balconies, ran down the... Wait, what? This... Huh. What a strange segue here. Huh. Alright then. Toward the balcony that ran down one side of the audience room. A sudden run, a nimble jump, a sudden hail of crossbow quarrels. He shuddered. The patrician cradled his chins in a beringed hand and regarded the wizard with eyes as small and hard as beads. Let me see, he said. Oath-breaking, the theft of the horse, uttering false coinage. Yes, I think it's the arena for you, Rincewind. This was too much. I didn't steal the horse, I bought it fairly. But with false coinage. Technically theft, you see. But those Renu are solid gold. Renu? The patrician rolled one of them around in his thick fingers. Is that what they're called? How interesting. But as you point out, they are not very similar to dollars. Well, of course they're not. Ah, you admit it then. Rincewind opened his mouth to speak, thought better of it, and shut it again. Quite so. And on top of these, there is, of course, the mortal obloquy attendant on the cowardly betrayal of a visitor to this shore. For shame, Rincewind! The patrician waved a hand vaguely. The guards behind Rincewind backed away, and their captain took a few paces to the right. Rincewind suddenly felt very alone. It is said that when a wizard is about to die, death himself turns up to claim him, instead of delegating the task to subordinates such as disease or famine, as is usually the case. Rincewind looked around nervously for a tall figure in black. Wizards, even failed wizards, have, in addition to rods and cones in their eyeballs, the tiny octagons that enable them to see into the far octarine, the basic color of which all other colors are merely pale shadows impinging on normal four-dimensional space. It is said to be a sort of fluorescent greenish-yellow-purple. Was that a flickering shadow in the corner? Of course, said the patrician. I could be merciful. The shadow disappeared. Rincewind looked up, an expression of insane hope on his face. Yes, he said. The patrician waved a hand again. Rincewind saw the guards leave the chamber, alone with the overlord of the Twin Cities. He almost wished they would come back. Come hither, Rincewind, said the patrician. He indicated a bowl of savories on a low onyx table by the throne. Would you care for a crystallized jellyfish? No? Said Rincewind. No. Now, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say, said the patrician amiably. Otherwise, you will die, in an interesting fashion, over a period... Please stop fidgeting like that. Since you are a wizard of sorts, you are, of course, aware that we live upon a world shaped, as it were, like a disk, and that there is said to exist toward the far rim a continent which, though small, is equal in weight to all the mighty land masses in this semicircle, and that this, according to ancient legend, is because it is largely made out of gold? Rincewind nodded. Who hadn't heard of the counterweight continent? Some sailors even believed the childhood tales and sailed in search of it. Of course, they returned either empty-handed or not at all, probably eaten by giant turtles, in the opinion of more serious mariners, because, of course, the counterweight continent was nothing more than a solar myth. It does, of course, exist, said the patrician, although it is not made of gold. It is true that gold is a very common metal there. Most of the mass is made up by vast deposits of octaron deep within the crust. Now, it will be obvious in an incisive mind like yours that the existence of the counterweight continent poses a deadly threat to our people here. He paused, looking at Rincewind's open mouth. He sighed. He said, Do you by some chance fail to follow me? Ah, said Rincewind. He swallowed and licked his lips. Well, gold. I see, said the patrician sweetly. You feel perhaps that it would be a marvelous thing to go to the counterweight continent and bring back a shipload of gold? Rincewind had a feeling that some sort of trap was being set. Yes? He ventured. And if every man on the shores of the Circle Sea had a mountain of gold of his own, would that be a good thing? What would happen? Think carefully. Rincewind's brow furrowed. He thought, we'd all be rich? The way the temperature fell at this remark told him that it was not the correct one. I may as well tell you, Rincewind, that there is some contact between the Lords of the Circle Sea and the Emperor of the Egyptian Empire, as it is styled. The patrician went on. It is only very slight. There is little common ground between us. We have nothing they want, and they have nothing we can afford. It is an old empire, Rincewind. Old and cunning and cruel and very, very rich. So we exchanged fraternal greetings by albatross mail, at infrequent intervals. One such letter arrived this morning. A subject of the Emperor appears to have taken it into his head to visit our city. It appears he wishes to look at it. Only a madman would possibly undergo all the privations of crossing the Turnwise Ocean in order to merely look at anything, however. He landed this morning. He might have met a great hero, or the cunningness of thieves, or some wise and great sage. He met you. He has employed you as a guide. You will be a guide, Rincewind, to this looker, this true flower. You will see that he returns home with a good report of our little homeland. What do you say to that? Thank you, Lord, said Rincewind miserably. There is another point, of course. It would be a tragedy should anything untoward happen to our little visitor. It would be dreadful if he were to die, for example. Dreadful for the whole of our land, because the Aegidian Emperor looks after his own and could certainly extinguish us at a nod. A mere nod. And that would be dreadful for you, Rincewind, because in the weeks that remained before the Empire's huge mercenary fleet arrived, certain of my servants would occupy themselves about your person in the hope that the avenging captains, on their arrival, might find their anger tempered by the sight of your still living body. There are certain spells that can prevent the life departing from the body, be it never so abused. And I see by your face that understanding dawns. I beg your pardon? Yes, Lord. I'll, see through it. I'll endeavor to see... I'll try to look after him and see he comes to no harm. And after that, I'll get a job juggling snowballs through hell, he added bitterly in the privacy of his own skull. Capital! I gather already that you and Chewflower are on the best of terms. An excellent beginning. When he returns safely to his homeland, you will not find me ungrateful. I shall probably even dismiss the charges against you. Thank you, Rincewind. You may go. Rincewind decided not to ask for the return of his 5 remaining Rinu. He backed away cautiously. Oh, and there is one other thing, the patrician said, as the wizard groped for the door handles. Yes, Lord, he replied with a sinking heart. I'm sure you won't dream of trying to escape from your obligations by fleeing the city. I judge you to be a born city person, but you may be sure that the lords of the other cities will be apprised of these conditions by nightfall. I assure you the thought never even crossed my mind, Lord. Indeed. Then if I were you, I'd sue my face for slander. Rincewind reached the broken drum at a dead run, and was just in time to collide with a man who came out backward, fast. The stranger's haste was in part accounted for by the spear in his chest. He bubbled noisily and dropped dead at the wizard's feet. Rincewind peered around the doorframe and jerked back as a heavy throwing axe whirred past like a partridge. It was probably a lucky throw. A second cautious glance told him. The dark interior of the drum was a broil of fighting men, quite a number of them. A third and a longer glance confirmed in bits. Rincewind swayed back as a wildly thrown stool sailed past and smashed on the far side of the street. Then he dived in. He was wearing a dark robe, made darker by constant wear and irregular washings. In the raging gloom, no one appeared to notice a shadowy shape that shuffled desperately from table to table. At one point, a fighter, staggering back, trod on what felt like fingers. A number of what felt like teeth bit his ankle. He yelped shrilly and dropped his guard just sufficiently for a sword swung by a surprised opponent to skewer him. Rincewind reached the stairway, sucking his bruised hand and running with a curious bent-over gait. A crossbow quarrel thunked into the banister rail above him, and he gave a whimper. He made the stairs in one breathless rush, expecting at any moment another, more accurate shot. In the corridor above, he stood upright, gasping, and saw the floor in front of him scattered with bodies. A big black bearded man with a bloody sword in one hand was trying a door handle. "Hey!" screamed Rincewind. The man looked around and then, almost absent-mindedly, drew a short throwing knife from his bandolier and hurled it. Rincewind ducked. There was a brief scream behind him as the crossbow man, sighting down his weapon, dropped it and clutched at his throat. The big man was already reaching for another knife. Rincewind looked around wildly and then, with wild improvisation, drew himself up in a wizardly pose. His hand was flung back. "Asaniti, Kyorucha, Beelzebor!" The man hesitated, his eyes flicking nervously from side to side as he waited for the magic. The conclusion that there was not going to be any hit him at the same time as Rincewind, whirring wildly down the passage, kicked him sharply in the groin. As he screamed and clutched himself, the wizard dragged open the door, sprang inside, slapped him behind him, and threw his body against it, panting. It was quiet in here. There was Chewflower sleeping peacefully on the low bed, and there at the foot of the bed was the luggage. Rincewind took a few steps forward, cupidity moving him as easily as if he were on little wheels. The chest was open. There were bags inside, and in one of them he caught the gleam of gold. For a moment greed overcame caution, and he reached out gingerly. But what was the use? He'd never lived to enjoy it. Reluctantly, he drew his hand back and was surprised to see a slight tremor in the chest's open lid. Hadn't it shifted slightly, as though rocked by the wind? Rincewind looked at his fingers and then at the lid. It looked heavy and was bound with brass bands. It was quite still now. What wind? Rincewind! Chewflower sprang off the bed. The wizard jumped back, wrenching his features into a smile. My dear chap, right on time. We'll just have lunch and then I'm sure you've got a wonderful program lined up for this afternoon. That's great! Rincewind took a deep breath. Look, he said desperately, let's eat somewhere else. There's been a bit of a fight down below. A tavern brawl? Why didn't you wake me up? Well, you see, What? I thought I made myself clear this morning, Rincewind. I want to see genuine Morporkian life. The slave market, the whore pits, the temple of small gods, the beggars guild, and the genuine tavern brawl. A faint note of suspicion entered the Chewflower's voice. You do have them, don't you? You know, people swinging on chandelier, sword fights over the table, the sort of thing Hrun the Barbarian and the Weasel are always getting involved in. You know, excitement. Rincewind sat down heavily on the bed. You want to see a fight? He said. Yes. What's wrong with that? For a start, people get hurt. Oh, I wasn't suggesting we get involved. I just want to see one, that's all. And some of your famous heroes. You do have some, don't you? It's not all dockside talk. And now, to the wizard's astonishment, Chewflower was almost bleeding. Oh yeah, we have them all right, said Rincewind hurriedly. He pictured them in his mind and recoiled from the thought. All the heroes the Circle Sea passed through the gates of Ankh-Morpork sooner or later. Most of them were from the barbaric tribes near the frozen hub, which had a sort of export trade in heroes. Almost all of them had crude magic swords, whose unsuppressed harmonics on the astral plane played hell with any delicate experiments in applied sorcery for miles around. But Rincewind didn't object to them on that score. He knew himself to be a magical dropout, so it didn't bother him that the mere appearance of a hero at the city gates was enough to cause retorts to explode and demons to materialize all through the magical quarter. No, what he didn't like about heroes was that they were usually suicidally gloomy when sober, and homicidally insane when drunk. There were too many of them, too. Some of the most notable questing grounds near the city were a veritable hubbub in the season. There was talk of organizing a rota. He rubbed his nose. The only heroes he had much time for were Bravd and the Weasel, who were out of town at the moment, and Hrun the Barbarian, who was practically an academic by hub standards in that he could think without moving his lips. Hrun was said to be rowing somewhere turn-wise. Look, he said at last, have you ever met a barbarian? Chewflower shook his head. I was afraid of that, said Rincewind. Well, there was a clatter of running feet in the street outside and a fresh uproar from downstairs. It was followed by a commotion on the stairs. The door was flung open before Rincewind could collect himself sufficiently to make a dash for the window. But instead of the greed-crazed madman he expected, he found himself looking into the round, red face of a sergeant of the watch. He breathed again, of course. The watch were always careful not to intervene too soon in any brawl, where the odds were not heavily stacked in their favor. The job carried the pension and attracted a cautious, thoughtful kind of man. The sergeant glowered at Rincewind and then peered at Chewflower with interest. Everything all right there, then, he said. Oh, fine, said Rincewind. Got held up, did you? The sergeant ignored him. This the foreigner, then? He inquired. We were just leaving, said Rincewind quickly, and switched to Throb. Chewflower, I think we ought to get lunch somewhere else. I know some places. He marched out into the corridor with as much aplomb as he could muster. Chewflower followed, and a few seconds later there was a strangling sound from the sergeant as the luggage closed its lid with a snap. Stood up, stretched, and marched after them. Watchmen were dragging bodies out of the room downstairs. There were no survivors. The watch had ensured this by giving them ample time to escape via the back door. A neat compromise between caution and justice that benefited all parties. Who are all these men? Said Chewflower. Oh, you know, just men, said Rincewind. And before he could stop himself, some part of his brain that had nothing to do took control of his mouth and added, heroes, in fact. Really? When one foot is stuck in the gray miasma Hyrule, it is much easier to step right to instinct rather than prolong the struggle. Rincewind let himself go. Yes, that one there is Erig strong in the arm. Over there is Blag Zanel. Is Hrun the Barbarian here? Said Chewflower, looking around eagerly. Rincewind took a deep breath. That's him behind us, he said. The enormity of this lie was so great that its ripples did in fact spread out one of the lower astral planes as far as the magical quarter across the river, where it picked up tremendous velocity from the huge standing wave of power that always hovered there and bounced wildly across the Circle Sea. A harmonic got as far as Rune himself, currently fighting a couple of gnolls on a crumbling ledge high in the Cataract Mountains, and caused him a moment's unexplained discomfort. Chewflower, meanwhile, had thrown back the lid of the luggage and was hastily pulling out the heavy black cube. This is fantastic, he said. They're never going to believe this at home. What's he going on about? Said the sergeant doubtfully. He's pleased you rescued us, said Rincewind. He looked sidelong at the black box, half expecting it to explode or emit strange musical tones. Ah, said the sergeant. He was staring at the box too. Chewflower smiled brightly at them. I'd like a record of the event, he said. Do you think you could ask them all to stand over by the window? Please? This won't take a moment. And, Rincewind? Yes? Chewflower stood on tiptoe to whisper. I expect you know what this is, don't you? Rincewind stared down at the box. It had a round glass eye protruding from the center of one face, and the lever at the back. Not wholly, he said. It's a device for making pictures quickly, said Chewflower. Quite a new invention. I'm rather proud of it, but look. I don't think these gentlemen would, well, I mean, they might be sort of apprehensive. Could you explain it to them? I'll reimburse them for their time, of course. He's got a box with demon in it that draws pictures, said Rincewind shortly. Do what the madman sends and he will give you gold. The watch smiled nervously. I'd like you in the picture, Rincewind, that's fine. Chewflower took out the golden disc that Rincewind had noticed before, squinted at its unseen face for a moment, muttered, 30 seconds should about do it, and said brightly, Smile, please. Smile, rasped Rincewind. There was a whir from the box. Right. High above the disc, the second albatross soared. So high, in fact, that its tiny, mad orange eyes could see the whole of the world and the great glittering, girdling Circle Sea. There was a yellow message capsule strapped to one leg. Far below it, unseen in the clouds, the bird that had brought the earlier message to the patrician of Morpok flapped gently back to its home. I'll take a short break. It's a very chaotic way of writing, I feel like. The perspective switches back and forth a lot. And it's like... it can be confusing sometimes, huh? Rest my vocals. I like the murder hobo adventurers running around the world, just kind of doing whatever the hell they want, and that speaks to me. I feel like. Big stretch. Oy. Writing a book? I don't suppose I'm a very good writer at all. I feel like I need to read much more books before I can even think of such a thing. Because I'm not much of a book reader. Because otherwise, if you don't read books and you try to write something, you end up with like stuff like Twilight and other fanfics. But maybe after I read like 200 books or something, I can think about it. Not to mention that I'd forget what the hell I'm writing about half the time, which is another issue. But I don't suppose I've actually ever thought about such a thing. Okay, let me take a swig of water and keep reading for a little while longer. Maybe, I don't know, once I finish reading for today, I'll like I'll play some games or something. Pull out a backlog hell or some such. It says 1 hour 4 minutes left in the chapter on my Kindle. So I suppose that's about how much I'll keep reading for. Maybe. I don't know. And I'm 15% of the way through the book. Okay. I shall continue. Perhaps, yeah, backlog hell, or yeah, something along those lines. Or I could choose something from my already backlogged games that I held already. We'll see. Hey, Hadi, thank you for the 5-stream streak. Hype. Okay, well, I'll get back to the whole reading business, I suppose. Rincewind looked at the tiny square of glass in astonishment. There he was, all right. A tiny figure, in perfect color, standing in front of a group of watchmen whose faces were each frozen on a terrified rictus. A buzz of wordless terror went up from the men around him as they craned over his shoulder to look. Grinning, Two-Flower produced a handful of the smaller coins Rincewind now recognized as quarter renu. He winked at the wizard. I had similar problems when I stopped over in the Brown Islands, he said. They thought the iconograph steals a bit of their souls. Laughable, isn't it? Arr, said Rincewind. And then, because somehow that was hardly enough to keep up his side of the conversation, added, I don't think it looks very like me, though. It's easy to operate, said Two-Flower, ignoring him. Look, all you have to do is press this button. The iconograph does the rest. Now, I'll just stand over here next to Harun, and you can take the picture. The coins quietened the men's agitation in the way that gold can, and Rincewind was amazed to find, half a minute later, that he was holding a little glass portrait of Two-Flower, wielding a huge notched sword, and smiling as though all his dreams had come true. They lunched at a small eating house near the brass bridge, with the luggage nestling under the table. The food and wine, both far superior to Rincewind's normal fare, did much to relax him. Things weren't going to be too bad, he decided. A bit of invention and some quick thinking, that was all that was needed. Jewflower seemed to be thinking too. Looking respectfully into his wine cup, he said, "Tavern fights are pretty common around here, I expect." "Oh, fairly. No doubt fixtures and fittings get damaged?" Oh, I see. You mean like benches and whatnot." "Yes, I suppose so." "That must be upsetting for the innkeepers." "I've never really thought about it. I suppose it must be one of the risks of the job." Jewflower regarded him thoughtfully. "I might be able to help there," he said. "Risks are my business. I say, this food is a bit greasy, isn't it?" "You did say you wanted to try some typical Morporkian food," said Rincewind. "What was that about risks?" "Oh, I know all about risks. They're my business." "I thought that was what you said. I didn't believe it the first time either." "Oh, I don't take risks. About the most exciting thing that happened to me was knocking some ink over. I assess risks, day after day. Do you know what the odds are against a house catching fire in the Red Triangle district of Belargic? 538 to 1. I calculated that," he added with a trace of pride. "What?" Rincewind tried to suppress a burp. What for? Excuse me." He helped himself to some more wine. "For," Jewflower paused. "I can't say it in Trob," he said. "I don't think the Bitrobi have a word for it. In my language we call it..." He said a collection of outlandish syllables. "Insurance," repeated Rincewind. "That's a fun word. What's it mean?" "Well, suppose you have a ship loaded with, say, gold bars. It might run into storms or be taken by pirates. You don't want that to happen, so you take out an insurance policy. I work out the odds against the cargo being lost based on weather reports and piracy records for the last 20 years. Then I add the bit, then you pay me some money based on these odds." "And the bit," Rincewind said, waggling a finger solemnly. "And then, if the cargo is lost, I reimburse you." "Reimburse?" "Pay you the value of your cargo," said Jewflower patiently. "I get it. It's like a bet, right?" "A wager? In a way, I suppose. And you make money at this, insurance?" "It offers a return on investment, certainly." Wrapped in the warm yellow glow of the wine, Rincewind tried to think of insurance in Circle C terms. "I don't think I understand this insurance," he said firmly, idly watching the world spin by. "Magic now. Magic I understand." Jewflower grinned. "Magic is one thing, and the reflected sound of underground spirits is another," he said. "What? What?" "That funny word you used," said Rincewind impatiently. "Reflected sound of underground spirits? Never heard of it." Jewflower tried to explain. Rincewind tried to understand. In the long afternoon, they toured the city turnwise of the river. Jewflower led the way, with a strange picture box slung on a strap around his neck. Rincewind trailed behind, whimpering at intervals and checking to see that his head was still there. A few others followed, too. In a city where public executions, duels, fights, magical feuds, and strange events regularly punctuated the daily round, the inhabitants had brought the profession of interested bystander to peak of perfection. They were, to man, highly skilled gawpers. In any case, Jewflower was delightedly taking picture after picture of people engaged in what he described as typical activities, and since a quarterino would subsequently change hands for their trouble, a tale of bemused and happy novel riches was soon following him in case this madman exploded in a shower of gold. At the temple of the seven-handed Sek, A hasty convocation of priests and ritual heart transplant artisans agreed that the 100-span high statue of Sek was altogether too holy to be made into a magic picture. But a payment of 2 Rinu left him astoundingly agreeing that perhaps he wasn't as holy as all that. A prolonged session at the Horpits produced a number of colorful and instructive pictures, a number of which Rincewind concealed about his person for detailed perusal in private. As the fumes cleared from his brain, he began to speculate seriously as to how the iconograph worked. Even the failed wizard knew that some substances were sensitive to light. Perhaps the glass plates were treated by some arcane process that froze the light that passed through them. Something like that, anyway. Rincewind often suspected that there was something somewhere that was better than magic. He was usually disappointed. However, he soon took every opportunity to operate the box. Chewflower was only too pleased to allow this, since that enabled the little man to appear in his own pictures. It was at this point that Rincewind noticed something strange. Possession of the box conferred a kind of power on the wielder, which was that anyone confronted with the hypnotic glass eye would submissively obey the most peremptory orders about stance and expression. It was while he was thus engaged in the Plaza of Broken Moons that disaster struck. Chewflower had posed alongside a bewildered charm seller, his crowd of newfound admirers watching him with interest in case he did something humorously lunatic. Rincewind got down on one knee, the better to arrange the picture, and pressed the enchanted lever. The box said, "It's no good. I've run out of pink." A hitherto unnoticed door opened in front of his eyes. A small, green, and hideously warty humanoid figure leaned out, pointed at a color-encrusted palette in one clawed hand, and screamed at him. "No pink, see?" screeched the homunculus. "No good. You going on pressing the lever and there's no pink, is there? If you wanted pink, you shouldn't have took all those pictures of young ladies, should you? It's monochrome from now on, friend, alright?" "Alright, yeah, sure," said Rincewind. In one dim corner of the little box, he thought he could see an easel and a tiny, unmade bed. He hoped he couldn't. "So long as that's understood," said the imp, and shut the door. Rincewind thought he could hear the muffled sound of crumbling and the scrape of a stool being dragged across the floor. "Chewflower," he began, and looked up. Chewflower had vanished. As Rincewind stared at the crowd with a sensation of prickly horror traveling up his spine, there came a gentle prod in the small of his back. "Turn without haste," said a voice like black silk, "or kiss your kidneys goodbye." The crowd watched with interest. It was turning out to be quite a good day. Rincewind turned slowly, feeling the point of the sword scrape along his ribs. At the other end of the blade he recognized Stren Whittle, thief, cruel swordsman, disgruntled contender for the title of worst man in the world. "Hi," he said weakly. A few yards away he noticed a couple of unsympathetic men raising the lid of the luggage and pointing excitedly at the bags of gold. Whittle smiled. It made an unnerving effect on his scar-crossed face. "I know you," he said. "A gutter wizard. What is that thing?" Rincewind became aware that the lid of the luggage was trembling slightly, although there was no wind, and he was still holding the picture box. "This? It makes pictures," he said brightly. "Hey, just hold that smile, will you?" He backed away quickly and pointed the box. For a moment, Whittle hesitated. "What?" he said. "That's fine, hold it just like that," said Rincewind. The thief paused, then growled and swung his sword back. There was a snap, and a duet of horrible screams. Rincewind did not glance around for fear of the terrible things he might see, and by the time Whittle looked for him again, he was on the other side of the plaza, and still accelerating. The albatross descended in wide, slow sweeps that ended in the undignified flurry of feathers and a thump as it landed heavily on its platform in the patrician's bird garden. The custodian of the birds, dozing in the sun and hardly expecting a long-distance message so soon after his morning's arrival, jerked to his feet and looked up. A few moments later, he was scuttling through the palace's corridors holding the message capsule and, owing to the carelessness brought on by surprise, sucking at the nasty beak wound on the back of his hand. Rincewind pounded down an alley, paying no heed to the screams of rage coming from the picture box, and cleared the high wall with his frayed robe flapping around him like the feathers of a disheveled jackdaw. He landed in the forecourt of a carpet shop, scattering the merchandise and customers, dived through its rear exit, trailing apologies, skilled down another alley and stopped, teetering dangerously, just as he was about to plunge unthinkingly into the Ankh. There are said to be some mystic rivers, one drop of which can steal a man's life away. After its turbid passage through the Twin Cities, the Ankh could have been one of them. In the distance, the cries of rage took on a shrill note of terror. Rincewind looked around desperately for a boat, or a handhold up the sheer walls on either side of him. He was trapped. Unbidden, the spell welled up in his mind. It was perhaps untrue to say that he had learned it. It learned him. The episode had led to his expulsion from Unseen University because, for a bet, he had dared to open the pages of the last remaining copy of the creator's own grimoire, the Octavo, while the university librarian was otherwise engaged. The spell had leapt out of the page and instantly burrowed deeply into his mind, whence even the combined talents of the Faculty of Medicine had been unable to coax it. Precisely which one it was, they were also unable to ascertain, except that it was one of the 8 basic spells that were intricately interwoven with the very fabric of time and space itself. Since then, it had been showing a worrying tendency. When Rincewind was feeling run down or especially threatened, to try to get itself said. He clenched his teeth together, but the first syllable forced itself around the corner of his mouth. His left hand raised involuntarily, and as the magical force whirled him around, began to give off octarine sparks. The luggage hurtled around the corner, its several hundred knees moving like pistons. Rincewind gaped. The spell died, unsaid. The box didn't appear to be hampered in any way by the ornamental rug draped roguishly over it, nor by the thief hanging by one arm from the lid. It was, in a very real sense, a dead weight. Farther along the lid were remains of 2 fingers, owner unknown. The luggage halted a few feet from the wizard, and, after a moment, retracted its legs. It had no eyes that Rincewind could see, but he was nevertheless sure that it was staring at him, expectantly. "Shoo," he said weakly. It didn't budge, but the lid creaked open, releasing the dead thief. Rincewind remembered about the gold. Presumably, the box had to have a master. In the absence of Two-Flower, had it adopted him? The tide was turning, and he could see debris drifting downstream in the yellow afternoon light toward the river gate, a mere 100 yards downstream. It was the work of a moment to let the dead thief join them. Even if it was found later, it would hardly cause comment. And the sharks in the estuary were used to solid, regular meals. Rincewind watched the body drift away and considered his next move. The luggage would probably float. All he had to do was wait until dusk, and then go out to the tide. There were plenty of wild places downstream where he could wait ashore, and then, well, if the patrician really had sent out word about him, then a chance of clothing and a shave should take care of that. In any case, there were other lands, and he had the faculty for languages. Let him but get to Chimera or Gonim or Ekelpon, and half a dozen armies couldn't bring him back. And then, wealth, comfort, and security. There was, of course, the problem of Two-Flower. Rincewind allowed himself a moment's sadness. "It could be worse," he said by way of farewell. "It could be me." It was when he tried to move that he found his robe was caught on some obstruction. By craning his neck, he found that the edge of it was being gripped firmly by the luggage's lid. "Ah, Gorfall," said the patrician pleasantly. "Come in, sit down. Can I press you to a candied starfish? I'm yours to command, master, said the old man calmly. Save, perhaps, in the matter of preserved echinoderms. The patrician shrugged and indicated a scroll on the table. Read that, he said. Gorfall picked up the parchment and raised one eyebrow slightly when he saw the familiar ideograms of the Golden Empire. He read in silence for perhaps a minute and then turned the scroll over to examine minutely the seal on the obverse. You are famed as a student of Empire affairs, said the patrician. Can you explain this? Knowledge in the matter of the Empire is less in noting particular events than in studying a certain cast of mind, said the old diplomat. The message is curious, yes, but not surprising. This morning the Emperor instructed... The patrician allowed himself the luxury of a scowl. Instructed me, Gorfall, to protect this two-flower person. Now it seems I must have him killed. You don't find that surprising? No, the Emperor is no more than a boy. He's idealistic, keen, a god to his people. Whereas this afternoon's letter is, unless I'm very much mistaken, from 9 Turning Mirrors, the Grand Vizier. He has grown old in the service of several emperors. He regards them as a necessary but tiresome ingredient in the successful running of the Empire. He does not like things out of place. The Empire was not built by allowing things to get out of place. That is his view. I begin to see, said the patrician. Quite so, Gorfall smiled into his beard. This tourist is a thing that is out of place. After, according to his master's wishes, 9 Turning Mirrors would... After acceding to his master's wishes, 9 Turning Mirrors would, I am quite sure, make his own arrangements with a view to ensuring that one wanderer would not be allowed to return home, bringing, perhaps, the disease of dissatisfaction. The Empire likes people to stay where it puts them. So much more convenient, then, if this two-flower disappears for good in the barbarian lands. Meaning here, master. And your advice, said the patrician. Gorfall shrugged. Merely that you should do nothing. Matters will undoubtedly resolve themselves. However, he scratched an ear thoughtfully, perhaps the Assassin's Guild? Ah, yes, said the patrician. The Assassin's Guild. Who's their president at the moment? Zlorf Flannelfoot, master. Have a word with him, will ya? Quite so, master. The patrician nodded. It was all rather a relief. He agreed with 9 Turning Mirrors. Life was difficult enough. People ought to stay where they were put. Brilliant constellations shone down on the Discworld. One by one the traders shuttered their shops. One by one the ganefs, thieves, fine-wirers, whores, illusionists, backsliders, and second-story men awoke and breakfasted. Wizards went about their polydimensional affairs. Tonight saw the conjunction of 2 powerful planets, and already the air over the magical quarter was hazy with early spells. Look, said Rincewind, this isn't getting us anywhere. He inched sideways. The luggage followed faithfully, lid half open and menacing. Rincewind briefly considered making a desperate leap to safety. The lid smacked in anticipation. In any case, he told himself with sinking heart, the damn thing would only follow him again. It had that dogged look about him. Even if he managed to get to a horse, he had a nasty suspicion that it would follow him at its own pace. Endlessly. Swimming rivers and oceans, gaining slowly, every night, while he had to stop to sleep. And then one day in some exotic city and years hence, he'd hear the sound of hundreds of tiny feet accelerating down the road behind him. You've got the wrong man, he moaned. It's not my fault. I didn't kidnap him. The box moved forward slightly. Now there was just a narrow strip of greasy jetty between Rincewind's heels and the river. A flash of precognition told him that the box would be able to swim faster than he could. He tried not to imagine what it would be like to drown in the Yank. "It won't stop until you give in, you know," said a small voice conversationally. Rincewind looked down at the iconograph, still hanging around his neck. Its trapdoor was open, and the homunculus was leaning against the frame, smoking a pipe and watching the proceedings with amusement. "I'll take you in with me, at last," said Rincewind through gritted teeth. "At least, The imp took the pipe out of his mouth. "What did you say?" he said. "I said I'll take you in with me, damn it!" "Suit yourself." The imp tapped the side of the box meaningfully. "We'll see who sinks first." The luggage yawned and moved forward a fraction of an inch. "Oh, all right," said Rincewind irritably. "But you'll have to give me time to think." The luggage backed off slowly. Rincewind edged his way back onto reasonably safe land and sat down with his back against the wall. Across the river, the lights of Ankh City glowed. "You're a wizard," said the picture imp. "You'll think of some way to find them." "Not much of a wizard, I'm afraid." "You can just jump down on everyone and turn them into worms," the imp added encouragingly, ignoring his last remark. "No, turning to animals is an 8th level spell. I never even completed my training. I only know one spell." "Well, that'll do." "I doubt it," said Rincewind hopelessly. "What does it do then?" "Can't tell ya. Don't really want to talk about it. But frankly," he sighed, "no spells are much good. It takes 3 months to commit even a simple one to memory. And then once you've used it, poof, it's gone. That's what's so stupid about the whole magic thing, you know. You spend 20 years learning the spell that makes nude virgins appear in your bedroom, and then you're so poisoned by quicksilver fumes and half blind from reading old grimoires that you can't remember what happens next." "I never thought of it like that," said the imp. "Hey, look, this is all wrong. When Two Flowers said they'd got better kind of magic in the Empire, I thought... The imp looked at him expectantly. Rincewind cursed himself. "Well, if you must know, I thought he didn't mean magic. Not as such." "What else is there, then?" Rincewind began to feel really wretched. "I don't know," he said. "A better way of doing things, I suppose. Something with a bit of sense in it. Harnessing the lightning or something." The imp gave him a kind but pitying look. "Lightning is the spears hurled by the thunder giants when they fight," it said gently. "Established meteorological fact. You can't harness it." "I know," said Rincewind miserably. "That's the flaw in the argument, of course." The imp nodded and disappeared into the depths of the iconograph. A few moments later, Rincewind smelled bacon frying. He waited until his stomach couldn't stand the strain anymore, and rapped on the box. The imp reappeared. "I've been thinking about what you said." It said before Rincewind could open his mouth. "And even if you could get a harness on it, how could you get it to pull a cart?" "What the hell are you talking about?" "Lightning. It just goes up and down. You'd want it to go along, not up and down. Anyway, it would probably burn through the harness." "I don't care about the lightning. How can I think on an empty stomach?" "Eat something then." "That's logic." "How?" "Every time I move that damn box flexes its hinges at me." The luggage on cue gaped widely. "See?" "It's not trying to bite you," said the imp. "There's food in there. You know you should starved." Rincewind peered into the dark recesses of the luggage. There were indeed, among the chaos of boxes and bags of gold, several bottles and packages in oiled paper. He gave a cynical laugh, mooched around the abandoned jetty until he found a piece of wood about the right length, wedged it as politely as possible in the gap between the lid and the box, and pulled out one of the flat packages. It held biscuits that turned out to be as hard as diamond wood. "Bloody hell," he muttered, nursing his teeth. "Captain 8 Panther's Traveler's Digestives. Them." said the imp from the doorway to his box. Saved many a life at sea, they have. Oh, sure. Do you use them as a raft or just throw them to the sharks and sort of watch them sink? What's in the bottles? Poison? Water? But there's water everywhere. Why do you want to bring water? Trust? Trust? Yes. That's what he didn't. The water, here. See? Rincewind opened the bottle. The liquid inside might have been water. It had a flat, empty flavor with no trace of life. Neither taste nor smell, he grumbled. The luggage gave a little creak, attracting his attention. With a lazy air of calculated menace, it shut its lid slowly, grinding Rincewind's impromptu wedge like a dry loaf. Alright, he said. I'm thinking. Emor's headquarters were in the leaning tower at the junction of Rhyme Street and Frost Alley. At midnight, the solitary guard leaning in the shadows looked up at the conjoining planets and wondered idly what change in his fortunes they might herald. There was the faintest of sounds, as of a gnat yawning. The guard glanced down the deserted street and now caught the glimmer of moonlight on something lying in the mud a few yards away. He picked it up. The lunar light gleamed on gold, and his intake of breath was almost loud enough to echo down the hallway. There was a slight sound again, and another coin rolled into the gutter on the other side of the street. By the time he had picked it up, there was another, a little way off and still spinning. Gold was, he remembered, said to be formed from the crystallized light of stars. Until now, he had never believed it to be true, that something as heavy as gold could fall naturally from the sky. As he drew level with the opposite alley mouth, some more fell. It was still in its bag. There was an awful lot of it, and Rincewind brought it down heavily onto his head. When the guard came to, he found himself looking up into the wild-eyed face of a wizard, who was menacing his throat with a sword. In the darkness, too, something was gripping his leg. It was the disconcerting sort of grip that suggested that the gripper could grip a whole lot harder if he wanted to. "Where is he, the rich foreigner?" hissed the wizard. "Quickly!" "What's holding my leg?" said the man with a note of terror in his voice. He tried to wriggle free. The pressure increased. "You wouldn't want to know," said Rincewind. "Pay attention, please. Where's the foreigner?" "Not here. They've got him at Broadman's place. Everyone's looking for him." "You're Rincewind, aren't you? The box that bites people. Oh, no, please." Rincewind had gone. The guard felt the unseen leg gripper release his, or, as he was beginning to fear, its hold. Then, as he tried to pull himself to his feet, something big and heavy and square cannoned onto him out of the dark and plunged off after the wizard. Something with hundreds of tiny feet. With only his... actually, I'll take a little break here, because the ads are coming up, so might as well not get interrupted. And then we have about half hour more left of reading to finish off this chapter, so, yeah. Stay tuned with me for a little while, and I'll come back. Okie dokie. Wow. I return. And so does the music. Alright, I suppose let's get going. Let's continue the reading, huh? Alright. With only his homemade phrasebook to help him, Two Flowers trying to explain the mysteries of insurance to Broadman. The fat innkeeper was listening intently, his little black eyes glittering. From the other end of the table, Emor watched with mild amusement, occasionally feeding one of his ravens with scraps from his plate. Beside him, Whittle paced up and down. "You fret too much," said Emor, without taking his eyes from the two men opposite him. "I can feel it, Stren. Who would dare attack us here? And the gutter wizard will come. He's too much of a coward not to. and he'll try to bargain, and we shall have him, and the gold, and the chest. Whittle's one-eyed glared, and he smacked the fist into the palm of a black-gloved hand. Who would have thought there was so much sapient pearwood in the whole of the disc, he said. How could we have known? You fret too much, Stren. I'm sure you can do better this time, said Emor pleasantly. The lieutenant snorted in disgust and strode off around the room to bully his men. Emor carried on watching the tourist. It was strange, but the little man didn't seem to realize the seriousness of his position. Emor had on several occasions seen him look around the room with an expression of deep satisfaction. He had also been talking for ages to Broadman, and Emor had seen a piece of paper change hands, and Broadman had given the foreigner some coins. It was strange. When Broadman got up and waddled past Emor's chair, the Chief Master's arm shot out like a steel spring and grabbed the fat man by his apron. What was that all about, friend? Asked Emor quietly. Nothing, Emor, just private business like. There are no secrets between friends, Broadman. Well, I'm not sure about it myself, really. It's a sort of bet, see, said the innkeeper nervously. Insurance, it's called. It's like a bet that the broken drum won't get burned down. Emor held the man's gaze until the broad man twitched in fear and embarrassment. Then the thief master laughed. This worm-eaten old cinder pile, he said. The man must be mad. Yes, but mad with money. He says now he's got the can't remember the word. It begins with a P. It's what you might call the stake money. The people he works for in the Agatian Empire will pay up if the broken drum burns down. Not that I hope it does. Burn down? The broken drum? I mean, it's like a home to me. Is the drum? Not entirely stupid, are you? Said Emor and pushed the innkeeper away. The door slammed back on its hinges and thudded into the wall. Hey, that's my door! Screamed Broadman. Then he realized who was standing at the top of the steps and ducked behind the table a mere shaving of time before a short black dart sped across the room and thunked into the woodwork. Emor moved his hand carefully and poured out another flagon of beer. Give me a second, R2 wants food. Okie dokie. Won't you join me, Zlorf? He said levelly, and put that sword away. Stren. Zlorf Flannelfoot is our friend. The president of the Assassin's Guild spun his short blowgun dexterously and slotted it into his holster in one smooth movement. Stren, said Emor. The black-clad thief hissed and sheathed his sword, but he kept his hand on the hilt and his eyes on the assassin. That wasn't easy. Promotion in the Assassin's Guild was by competitive examination, the practical being the most important indeed, the only part. Thus, Slorf's broad, honest face was a wealth of scar tissue, the result of many a close encounter. It probably hadn't been all that good-looking in any case. It was said that Slorf had chosen a profession in which dark hoods, cloaks, and nocturnal prowlings figured largely because there was a day-fearing trollish streak in his parentage. People who said this in earshot of Slorf tended to carry their ears home in their hats. He strolled down the stairs, followed by a number of assassins. When he was directly in front of Emor, he said, "I've come for the tourist." Is it any of your business, Slorf? Yes. Grinjo, Urmond, take him. Two of the assassins stepped forward. Then Stren was in front of them. his sword appearing to materialize in an inch from their throats without having to pass through the intervening air. "Possibly I could kill only one of you," he murmured, "but I suggest you ask yourselves, which one?" "Look up, Zlorf," said Emor. A row of yellow, baleful eyes looked down from the darkness among the rafters. "One step more and you'll leave here with fewer eyeballs than you came with," said the Thief Master. "So sit down and have a drink, Zlorf, and let's talk about this sensibly. I thought we had an agreement. You don't rob, I don't kill. Not for payment, that is." He added a pause. Zlorf took the preferred beer. "So," he said, "I'll kill him, then you rob him. Is he that funny-looking one over there?" "Yes." Zlorf stared at Two-Flower, who grinned at him. He shrugged. He seldom wasted time pondering why people wanted other people dead. It was just a living. "Who is your client, may I ask?" said Emor. Zlorf held up a hand. "Please," he proceeded. Professional etiquette. Oh, of course. By the way, yes? I believe I have a couple of guards outside. Had. And some others in the doorway across the street. Formerly. And the true bowman on the roof. A flicker of doubt passed across Lor's face, like the last shaft of sunlight over a badly plowed field. The door flew open, badly damaging the assassin who was standing beside it. "Stop doing that!" shrieked Broadman from under his table. Zlorf and Emor stared up at the figure on the threshold. It was short, fat, and richly dressed. Very richly dressed. There were a number of tall, big shapes looming behind it. Very big, threatening shapes. "Who's that?" said Zlorf. "I know him," said Emor. "His name's Rurp. He runs the groaning platter tavern down by Brass Bridge. Stren, remove him." Rurp held up a beringed hand. Stren Whittle hesitated halfway through the door as several very large trolls ducked under the doorway and stood on either side of the fat man, blinking in the light. Muscles the size of melons bulged in forearms like flour sacks. Each troll held a double-headed axe between thumb and forefinger. Broadman erupted from cover, his face suffused with rage. "Out!" he screamed. "Get those trolls out of here!" No one moved. The room was suddenly quiet. Broadman looked around quickly. It began to dawn on him just what he had said. And to whom? A whimper escaped from his lips, glad to be free. He reached the doorway to his cellars just as one of the trolls, with a lazy flick of one half-sized hand, sent his axe whirling across the room. The slam of the door and its subsequent splitting as the axe hit it merged into one sound. "Bloody hell!" exclaimed Zlorf Flannelfoot. "What do you want?" said Emor. "I am here on behalf of the Guild of Merchants and Traders," said Rurp evenly. "To protect our interests, you might say. Meaning the little man." Emor wrinkled his eyebrows. "I'm sorry," he said. "I thought I heard you say the Guild of Merchants?" "And Traders," agreed Rurp. Behind him now, in addition to more trolls, were several humans that Emor vaguely recognized. He had seen them, maybe behind counters and bars. Shadowy figures, usually easily ignored, easily forgotten. At the back of his mind, a bad feeling began to grow. He thought about how it might be to be, say, a fox confronted with an angry sheep. A sheep, moreover, that could afford to employ wolves. "How long has this guild been in existence, may I ask?" he said. "Since this afternoon," said Rurp. "I'm Vice Guildmaster in charge of tourism, you know." "What is this tourism of which you speak?" We are not quite sure," said Rurp. An old bearded man poked his head over the Guildmaster's shoulder and cackled. "Speaking on behalf of the wine cellars of Morpork, tourism means business, see?" "Well," said Emor coldly. "Well," said Rurp, "we're protecting our interests, like I said." "Thieves out! Thieves out!" cackled his elderly companion. Several others took up the chant. Zlorf grinned. "And assassins!" chanted the old man. Slorf growled. "Stands to reason," said Rurf. "People robbing and murdering all over the place. What sort of impression are visitors going to take away? You come all the way to see our fine city with its many points of historical and civic interests, also many quaint customs, and you wake up dead in some back alley, or as it might be, floating down the Ankh. How are you going to tell all your friends what a great time you're having? Let's face it, you've got to move with the times." Slorf and Emor met each other's gaze. We have we? Then let us move, brother, agreed Slorf. In one movement, he brought his blowgun to his mouth and sent a dart hissing toward the nearest troll. It spun around, hurling his axe, which whirred over the assassin's head and buried itself in a luckless thief behind him. Rurf ducked, allowing a troll behind him to raise its huge iron crossbow and fire a spear-length quarrel into the nearest assassin. That was the start. It has been remarked before that those who are sensitive to radiations in the far octarine, the eighth color, the pigment of the imagination, can see things that others cannot. Thus it was that Rincewind, hurrying through the crowded, flare-lit evening bazaars of Morpork, with the luggage trundling behind him, jostled a tall, dark figure, turned to deliver a few suitable curses, and beheld death. It had to be death. No one else went around with empty eye sockets, and of course, the scythe over one shoulder was another clue. As Rincewind stared in horror at the courting couple, laughing at some private joke, walked straight through the apparition without appearing to notice it. Death, insofar as it was possible, in a face with no movable features, looked surprised. "Rincewind?" Death said, in tones as deep as heavy as the slamming of leaden doors far underground. Said Rincewind, trying to back away from that eyeless stare. "But why are you here?" Boom! Boom went crypt lids in the worm-haunted fastness under old mountains. Why not?" said Rincewind. "Anyway, I'm sure you've got lots to do, so if you'll just..." "I was surprised that you jostled me, Rincewind, for I have an appointment with thee this very night." "Oh, no, not..." "Of course, what's so bloody vexing about the whole business is that I was expecting to meet thee in Psephopolis. But that's 500 miles away. You don't have to tell me. The whole system's got screwed up again. I can see that. Look, there's no chance of you..." Rincewind backed away, hands spread protectively in front of him. The dried fish salesman on a nearby stall watched this madman with interest. "Not a chance. I could lend you a very fast horse." "No! It won't hurt a bit." "No!" Since Rincewind turned and ran. Death watched him go and shrugged bitterly. "Sod you then," Death said. He turned and noticed the fish salesman. With a snarl, Death reached out a bony finger and stopped the man's heart, but he didn't take much pride in it. Then Death remembered what was due to happen later that night. It would not be true to say that Death smiled, because in any case his features were perforce frozen in a calcareous grin. But he hummed a little tune, cheesy as a plague pit, and, pausing only to extract the life from a passing mayfly, and 1/9 of the lives from a cat cowering under the fish stall. All cats can see into the octarine. Death turned on his heel and set off towards the broken drum. Short Street, Morpork, is in fact one of the longest in the city. Filigree Street crosses it turnwise and in the manner of the crosspiece of a T, and the broken drum is so placed that it looks down the full length of the street. At the furthermost end of Short Street, a dark oblong rose on hundreds of tiny legs, and started to run. At first it moved at no more than a lumbering trot, but by the time it was halfway up the street it was moving arrow fast. A darker shadow inched its way along one of the walls of the drum, a few yards from the two trolls who were guarding the door. Rincewind was sweating. If they heard the faint clinking of the specially prepared bags at his belt... One of the trolls tapped his colleague on the shoulder, producing a noise like two pebbles being knocked together. He pointed down the starlit street. Rincewind darted from his hiding place, turned and hurled his burden through the drum's nearest window. Whittle saw it arrive. The bag arced across the room, turning slowly in the air, and burst on the edge of a table. A moment later, gold coins were rolling across the floor, spinning, glittering. The room was suddenly silent, save for the tiny noises of gold and the whimpers of the wounded. With a curse, Whittle dispatched the assassin he had been fighting. "It's a trick!" he screamed. "No one move!" 70 men and a dozen trolls froze in mid-grope. Then, for the third time, the door burst open. 2 trolls hurried through it, slammed it behind them, dropped the heavy bar across it, and fled down the stairs. Outside, there was a sudden crescendo of running feet, and for the last time the door opened. In fact, it exploded, the great wooden bar being hurled far across the room and the frame itself giving way. Door and frame landed on a table, which flew into splinters. It was then that the frozen fighters noticed that there was something else in the pile of wood. It was a box, shaking itself madly to free itself of the smashed timber around it. Rincewind appeared in the ruined doorway, hurling another of his gold grenades. It smashed into a wall, showering coins. Down in the cellar, Broadman looked up, muttered to himself, and carried on with his work. His entire Spindlewinter's supply of candles had already been strewn on the floor, mixed with his store of kindling wood. Now he was attacking a barrel of lamp oil. "In sewer ants," he muttered. Oil gushed out and swirled around his feet. Whittle stormed across the floor, his face a mask of rage. Rincewind took careful aim and caught the thief full in the chest with a bag of gold. But now Emor was shouting and pointing an accusing finger. A raven swooped down from its perch in the rafters and dived at the wizard, talons open and gleaming. It didn't make it. At about the halfway point, the luggage slipped from its bed of splinters, gaped briefly in midair, and snapped shut. It landed lightly. Rincewind saw it slid open again, slightly, just far enough for a tongue, large as a palm leaf, red as mahogany, to look up a few errant feathers. At the same moment, the giant candle wheel fell from the ceiling, plunging the room into gloom. Rincewind, coiling himself like a spring, gave a standing jump and grasped a beam, swinging himself up into the relative safety of the roof with a strength that amazed him. "Exciting, isn't it?" said a voice by his ear. Down below, thieves, assassins, trolls, and merchants all realized at about the same moment that they were in a room made of treacherous foothold by gold coins and containing something, among the suddenly menacing shapes in the semi-darkness, that was absolutely horrible. As one, they made for the door, but had 24 different recollections of its exact position. High above the chaos, Rincewind stared at Chewflower. "Did you cut the lights down?" he hissed. "Yes. How come you're up here?" "I thought I'd better not get in everyone's way." Rincewind considered this. There didn't seem to be much he could say. Chewflower added, "A real brawl. Better than anything I'd imagined. Do you think I ought to thank them? Or did you arrange it?" Rincewind looked at him blankly. "I think we ought to be getting down now," he said hollowly. "Everyone's gone." He dragged Chewflower across the littered floor and up the steps. They burst out into the tail end of the night. There were still a few stars, but the moon was down, and there was a faint gray glow to rimward. Most important, the street was empty. Rincewind sniffed. "Can you smell oil?" he said. Then Whittle stepped out of the shadows and tripped him up. At the top of the cellar steps, Broadman knelt down and fumbled in his tinder box. It turned out to be damp. "I'll kill that bloody cat," he muttered, and groped for the spare box that was normally on the ledge by the door. It was missing. Broadman said a bad word. A lighted taper appeared in midair, right beside him. "Here, take this." "Thanks," said Broadman. "Don't mention it." Broadman went to throw the taper down the steps. His hand paused in midair. He looked at the taper, his brow furrowing. Then he turned around and held the taper up to illuminate the scene. It didn't shed much light, but it did give the darkness shape. "Oh no," he breathed. "But yes," said Death. Rincewind rolled. For a moment he thought Whittle was going to spit him where he lay. But it was worse than that. He was waiting for him to get up. "I see you have a sword, wizard," he said quietly. "I suggest you rise and we shall see how well you use it." Rincewind stood up as slowly as he dared and drew from his belt the short sword he had taken from the guard a few hours and 100 years ago. It was a short, blunt affair compared to Whittle's hair-thin rapier. "But I don't know how to use a sword," he wailed. "Good. You know that wizards can't be killed by edged weapons," said Rincewind desperately. Whittle smiled coldly. "So I have heard," he said. "I look forward to putting it to the test," he lunged. Rincewind caught the thrust by sheer luck, jerked his hand away in shock, deflected the second stroke by coincidence, and took the third one through his robe at hard height. There was a clink. Whittle's snarl of triumph died in his throat. He drew the sword out and prodded again at the wizard, who was rigid with terror and guilt. There was another clink, and gold coins began to drop out of the hem of the wizard's robe. "So, you bleed gold, do ya?" hissed Whittle. "But have you got gold concealed in that raggedy beard, you little—" As his sword went back for its final sweep, the sullen glow that had been growing in the doorway of the broken drum flickered, dimmed, and erupted into a roaring fireball that sent the walls billowing outward and carried the roof 100 feet into the air before bursting through it in a gout of red-hot tiles. Whittle stared at the boiling flames, unnerved, and Rincewind leapt. He ducked under the thief's sword arm and brought his own blade around in an arc so incompetently misjudged that it hit the man flat first and jolted out of the wizard's hand. Sparks and droplets of flaming oil rained down as Whittle reached out with both gauntleted hands and grabbed Rincewind's neck, forcing him down. "You did this!" he screamed. "You and your box of trickery!" His thumb found Rincewind's windpipe. "This is it," the wizard thought. "Wherever I'm going, it can't be worse than here." "Excuse me," said Chewflower. Rincewind felt the grip lessen. And now Whittle was slowly getting up, a look of absolute hatred on his face. A glow ember landed on the wizard. He brushed it off hurriedly and scrambled to his feet. Chewflower was behind Whittle, holding the man's own needle-sharp sword, the point resting in the small of the thief's back. Rincewind's eyes narrowed. He reached into his robe, then withdrew his hand, bunched into a fist. "Don't move," he said. "Am I doing this right?" asked Chewflower anxiously. "He says he'll cure your liver if you move," Rincewind translated freely. "I doubt it," said Whittle. "Bet?" "No." As Whittle tensed himself to turn on the tourist, Rincewind lashed out and caught the thief in the jaw. Whittle stared at him in amazement for a moment, and then quietly toppled into the mud. The wizard uncurled his stinging fist, and the roll of gold coins slipped between his throbbing fingers. He looked down at the recumbent thief. "Good grief," he gasped. He looked out and yelled as another ember landed on his neck. Flames were racing along the rooftops on either side of the street. All around him, people were hurling possessions from windows and dragging horses from smoking stables. Another explosion, the white-hot volcano that was the drum, set a whole marble mantelpiece sliding overhead. The Widdershin gate's the nearest," Rincewind shouted above the crackle of collapsing rafters. "Come on!" He grabbed Chewflower's reluctant arm and dragged him down the street. "My luggage!" "Blast your luggage! Stay here much longer and you'll go where you don't need luggage! Come on!" screamed Rincewind. They jogged on through the crowd of frightened people leaving the area, while the wizard took great mouthfuls of cool dawn air. Something was puzzling him. I'm sure all the candles went out, he said. So, how did the drum catch fire? I don't know, moaned True Flower. It's terrible, Rincewind. We were getting along so well, too. Rincewind stopped in astonishment so that another refugee cannoned into him and spun away with an oath. Getting on? Yes, a great bunch of fellows, I thought. Language was a bit of a problem, but they were so keen for me to join their party. They just wouldn't take no for an answer. Really friendly people, I thought. Rincewind started to correct him, then realized he didn't know how to begin. It'll be a blow for old Broadman, Trueflower continued. Still, he was wise. I've still got the Rinu he paid us his first premium. Rincewind didn't know the meaning of the word premium, but his mind was working fast. You, insured the drum? He said. You bet Broadman it wouldn't catch fire? Oh yes, standard valuation, 200 Rinu. Why do you ask? Rincewind turned and stared at the flames racing towards them, and wondered how much of Ankh-Morpork could be bought for 200 Rinu. Quite a large piece, he decided. Only not now, not the way those flames were moving. He glanced down at the tourists. You, he began, and searched his memory for the worst word in the Trob tongue. The happy little Betrobi didn't really know how to swear properly. You, he repeated. Another hurrying figure bumped into him, narrowly missing him with a blade over its shoulder. Rincewind's tortured temper exploded. You, Lil! Such a one who, while wearing a copper nose ring, stands in a foot bath atop Mount Raruaraha during a heavy thunderstorm and shouts that Aluhura, goddess of lightning, has the facial features of a diseased Aluarhara root? Just doing my job, said the figure, stalking away. Every word fell as heavy as the slabs of marble. Moreover, Rincewind was certain that he was the only one who heard them. He grabbed True Flower again. Let's get out of here, he suggested. One interesting side effect of the fire in Ankh-Morpork concerns the insurance policy, which left the city through the ravaged roof of the broken drum, was wafted high into the Discworld's atmosphere on the ensuing thermal, and came to Earth several days and a few thousand miles away on an Olaruaha bush in the Betrobi Islands. The simple, laughing islanders subsequently worshipped it as a god, much to the amusement of their more sophisticated neighbors. Strangely enough, the rainfall and harvests in the next few years were almost supernaturally abundant, and this led to a research team being dispatched to the islands by the Minor Religions faculty of Unseen University. Their verdict was that it only went to show. The fire, driven by the wind, spread out from the drum faster than a man could walk. The timbers of the Withershin Gate were already on fire when Rincewind, his face blistered and reddened from the flames, reached them. By now, he and True Flower were on horseback. Mounts hadn't been that hard to obtain. A wily merchant had asked 50 times their worth and had been left gaping when 1,000 times their worth had been pressed into his hands. They rode through just before the first of the big gated timbers descended in an explosion of sparks. Morpork was already a cauldron of flame. As they galloped up the red-lit road, Rincewind glanced sideways at his traveling companion, currently trying hard to learn to ride a horse. Bloody hell, he thought, he's alive! Me too! Who'd have thought it? Perhaps there is something in this reflected sound of underground spirits? It was a cumbersome phrase, Rincewind tried to get his tongue around the thick syllables that were the words in True Flower's own language. Eco-lyrics, he tried? Ecognotics? Ecognomics? That would do, that sounded alright. Several hundred yards downriver from the last smoldering suburb of the city, a strangely rectangular and apparently heavily waterlogged object touched the mud on the Withershin bank. Immediately, it sprouted numerous legs and scrabbled for a purchase. Hauling itself to the top of the bank, the luggage, streaked with soot, stained with water, and very, very angry, shook itself and took its bearings. Then it moved away at a brisk trot. the small and incredibly ugly imp that was perching on its lid, watching the scenery with interest. Bravd looked at the weasel and raised his eyebrows. "And that's it," said Rincewind. "The luggage caught up with us. Don't ask me how. Is there any more wine?" The weasel picked up the empty wineskin. "I think you have had just about enough wine this night," he said. Bravd's forehead wrinkled. "Gold is gold," he said finally. "How can a man with plenty of gold consider himself poor? You're either poor or rich. It stands to reason." Rincewind hiccuped. He was finding reason rather difficult to hold on to. "Well," he said, "what I think is, the point is, well, you know, Octyron?" The two adventurers nodded. The strange iridescent metal was almost as highly valued in the lands around the Circle C as sapient pear wood, and was about as rare. A man who owned a needle made of Octyron would never lose his way, since it always pointed to the hub of the Discworld. Being acutely sensitive to the disk's magical field, it would also miraculously darn his socks. Well, my point is, you see, that gold also has its sort of magical field. Sort of financial wizardry. Economics, Rincewind giggled. The weasel stood up and stretched. The sun was well up now, and the city below them was wreathed in mists and full of foul vapors. Also gold, he decided. Even the citizen of Morpork would, at the very point of death, desert his treasure to save his skin. Time to move. The little man called Chewflower appeared to be asleep. The weasel looked down at him and shook his head. "The city awaits, such as it is," he said. "Thank you for a pleasant tale, wizard. What will you do now?" He eyed the luggage, which immediately backed away and snapped its lid at him. "Well, there are no ships leaving the city now," giggled Rincewind. "I suppose we'll take the coast road to Chirm. I've got to look after him, you see. But look, I didn't make it." Sure, said the weasel soothingly. He turned away and swung himself into the saddle of the horse that Bravd was holding. A few moments later, the two heroes were just specks under a cloud of dust, heading down towards the charcoal city. Rincewind stared musily at the recumbent tourist. At two recumbent tourists. In his somewhat defenseless state, a stray thought, wandering through the dimensions in search of a mind to harbor it, slid into his brain. "Here's another fine mess you got me into," he moaned, and slept backwards. "Mad," said the weasel. Bravd, galloping along a few feet away, nodded. "All wizards get like that," he said. "It's the quicksilver fumes. Rots their brains. Mushrooms, too." "However," said the brown-clad one. He reached into his tunic and took out a golden disc on a short chain. Bravd raised his eyebrows. "The wizard said that the little man had some sort of golden disc that told him the time," said the weasel. "Arousing your cupidity, little friend. You always were an expert thief, weasel." "Aye," agreed the weasel modestly. He touched the knob at the disc's rim, and it flipped open. The very small demon imprisoned within looked up from its tiny abacus and scowled. "It lacks but 10 minutes to 8 of the clock," it snarled. The lid slammed shut, almost trapping the weasel's fingers. We don't know if the weasel hurled the time teller far out into the heather, where it possibly hit a stone. Something, in any event, caused the case to split open. There was a vivid octarine flash and a whiff of brimstone as the time being vanished into whatever demonic dimension it called home. "What did you do that for?" said Bravd, who hadn't been close enough to hear the words. "Do what?" said the weasel. "I didn't do anything. Nothing happened at all. Come on, we're wasting opportunities." Bravd nodded. Together they turned their steeds and galloped toward the ancient Ankh. And the honest enchantments. Well, that was... end of chapter, I suppose. I love their imp technology. It's the best. Oh. Okay. I'm so tired, yo. Fun book, but again, it's not the kind you're supposed to be reading out loud, I think. It's very much giggle to yourself slightly as you read kind of thing. Or maybe it would be easier to a native English speaker, because I get tripped up sometimes with the way it's written. I need to get better at out loud English reading, I feel like. I think I should, yeah. Anyway, that's gonna be this reading stream. I'm gonna maybe take a little break and come back in a little bit, okay? And maybe play a game or two from my backlog hell. Yeah. I'll be right back.